So now the next one is Matthew says, do custom Google Maps with driving directions still work? If yes, then for what? Map or local SERPs, or maybe both? I don't know. According to one of our David, who comes here often and watches Hump Day Hangouts and stuff, he does a lot of Drive Stack stuff and Google Stack stuff, and he still does driving directions maps and all that. I've not done any specific testing with those in several years. Close to at least 2 years, but anyways, 2 to 3 years. It's been a while since I've done any specific testing with that. I saw kind of a declining effect from that 2 or 3 years ago when I had been testing those a lot more extensively, and I was seeing very little kind of movement. I think it's just another layer. It's not, I remember probably more than 5 years ago now, 5, 6, 7 years ago now, those were very, very powerful. My Maps and driving directions and Google Maps with driving directions. So remember, there's Google Business Profile Maps, there's My Maps, and then there's also just directions maps. And so what I've done, when I was doing a lot, like many years ago, My Maps was like a magic bullet, right? It was like the secret sauce. It was something you could do a lot of really amazing things with. And you can still push SEO, local SEO with My Maps. Again, it's not as effective as it used to be as a standalone, right? In other words, as another layer of things, another thing that you can do, another layer of activity, essentially, another layer of optimization. My Maps can be added into an overall project. I think driving directions can still be effective too, without doing any specific testing myself. Why don't I do any specific testing on driving directions? Because I work with service area businesses. That's why. So I think driving directions is more appropriate and more effective for storefront businesses. Although, we've heard about people talking about you can do driving directions from the center point of a city when it's a service area business, the city that the GBP is located in, and then have driving directions out to, houses in their service area, right? That could be potentially a client's house or whatever, customer's house or whatever. Or if it's a business to business type of service, then, to other businesses in the service area. I don't know how effective that is because I've not done any testing myself. Like I said, some people talk about, like David Morgan, I think he does some stuff with My Maps, and I'm not sure about driving directions, but maybe those two. So I think it's worth testing. Or if you can find somebody that's done some extensive testing and can show where it shows those kind of, that it has produced a result. I think just like so many other things, there are certain tactics that we use, right? So individual tactics that work phenomenally well until the general public catches on, and then Google eventually catches on and shuts it down, right? It doesn't mean that it makes it obsolete or non-effective entirely, but the amount of weight or value that Google puts on any one thing is diminished when Google finds out that it's being manipulated. Does that make sense? And so, I think it's just like anything else. At one time it was extremely effective. Now it's just another signal that you should have in your overall suite of signals, if that makes sense. So I don't do a lot of testing with the driving directions maps themselves because of the reasons I just mentioned. I also have gotten away from doing a lot of the extensive drive stack stuff. I've found recently I've been able to get significant results without all that stuff. And so I'm just reducing my workload and simplifying my business, if that makes sense, to only working on what I call pulling the biggest levers to achieve the biggest performance gains with the least amount of effort. And that's what I'm really trying to simplify my business and our processes now to only doing the stuff that is the most critical to achieve results. So those are kind of things that I don't typically test just because of all the reasons I just mentioned. It's still worth testing though, unless you can find somebody that has data that, it's still, by the way, you should still validate or verify what others say. Just the same as I tell people when I'm teaching and coaching and saying what I do, don't believe me, test it for yourself. I saw some comment today in YouTube on one of the videos where I was talking about topic and category optimization. And somebody said, I call BS, blah, blah, blah. I do all the, okay, fine. You can call BS all you want. I teach on what I do. And I always disclaim, this is what I'm finding. And I show results. This is what I find. This is what I do. I've said 1,000 times that there's a million ways to skin a cat. So don't ever take anybody's SEO training as being like the be all end all. Test for yourself, develop your own flavors. That's what I teach. Is I teach how to, what I do. And I always say, this is what I do. This is my experience. This is how the results that I'm getting. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, because there's a number of ways to do SEO, but just test and kind of figure it out yourself. But it's always good to have some sort of validation prior to setting up a test. When I say validation, like somebody claiming that it produces a result, so that you don't go out and just waste time, but it kind of, still, in my opinion, you should still verify things before just believing them and implementing them, right? Somebody asked
So
last. Go
Bradley
ahead.
actually said something very important here, that he can actually get results without them. So if you want to know how to actually do this, I highly recommend you join the mastermind.
Right. Thank you. It's a good pitch. But yeah, I mean, again, it's also like somebody I think asked last week, maybe, or maybe 2 weeks ago on Hump Day Hangouts, like, how do you find out, like, how do you find what works and what doesn't work or whatever? Set up test sites. There's not really another way to do it, guys. You have to test. And that's why I keep hammering this away every time I talk to anybody that will listen. Like, pick one industry and do all of your testing in one specific business type or industry type, because then you can start testing, setting up different. Remember, direct response marketing is always beat the controls. Same thing with SEO. Find the best performer, whatever it is that you're testing. You figure out and you establish a control, a baseline, right? A benchmark. And that is you find something that is performing fairly well. Okay. And that becomes your control. And then you test single variable changes to that same type of a setup, that same type of configuration, and monitor the results. And if it creates a positive result, right, a performance improvement, then duplicate that multiple times and see, does it consistently provide a performance improvement? If so, then that variable that you changed should now become part of the control. Like, in other words, that now becomes the new benchmark, the new control. And then you single variable test against that again. It doesn't mean you have to only test one variable, but you have to set up separate test projects to test different variables against what the control was, but only single variable. Because if you go in and you test 5 changes, then you don't know which one of those changes or which combination of those 5 things produce the result, either positive or negative, right? So now keep in mind, though, even single variable testing has its drawbacks besides the time, the amount of time required to do it properly. The other drawback is single variable testing, but what happens when you start to combine variables, right? Then that changes the dynamic of each individual single variable, right? So it becomes a lot more complicated. But single variable testing is important, in my opinion, because you can find certain signals or certain things that can, especially if you can duplicate and repeat that now has, at least as a standalone variable, that has a positive effect or negative effect, whatever. You determine what type of an effect it has. And then you can start testing with combinations of variables, right? If that's clear. And that's what I do, a lot of that kind of testing, but it's very difficult to do across multiple industries, guys. It's so much easier if you do it in one industry, right? And then that's why I'm telling you, build your whole fucking business around that one industry, because then you do all of your testing in that industry. And when you find stuff that works, you just scale it through duplication, right? You duplicate it and you just repeat. If you're in local SEO, which is what most people are here for, you duplicate by just you scale by duplicating that project into different locations. And you don't have any additional work at that point other than just deploying the assets that you've already proven are effective and perform well in that industry, right? Because, guys, with local, it doesn't, if you understand how to get results in local in a particular industry in one location, you can duplicate that in multiple locations. Nothing changes. The only thing that changes is perhaps the competition level, which means you might need more off-page signals, backlinks, engagement signals, etc. And the location modifiers. That's it. That's why, again, in the tree service industry, I've spent over 2 years now really testing what I just described, kind of single variable testing, to come down to what I've found is the so far, and it's still being tested against, right? I'm still trying to outperform my current configuration. But what I've been teaching in the DHA program for service area type businesses and that type of a site structure, and optimizing for topics and categories, entity-based SEO instead of keyword-based SEO, it's crushing it. And so, again, it goes back to just doing a lot of testing and figuring out. And what my coaching students or members or whatever, I always preface right up front, listen, I can give you the framework. This is what you should work with. Like, try to adapt this framework into whatever industry you're working in. And it's going to require a little bit of trial and error. But once you figure it out, now you've got something, you have an edge over most others because you have something that you've proven out consistently that you can repeat to get results for. And again, everything that I've been teaching about topic and category optimization, not having every single service times every single location page, which that's how we optimized several years ago. It's inefficient to do that now. Can you still get results with that? Yeah, sure, maybe. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm saying why? Why go through the process of having, if you've got 5 services in 5 locations under traditional SEO, local SEO, you'd have 25 pages minimum because it's going to be service times city 1, service city 2, service city 3, service 2, city 1, service 2, city 2, service 2, city 3, so on and so forth. 25 pages saying redundant, bloated, duplicate content, basically, other than location modifiers. That's a lot of additional work, a lot of additional link targets, a lot of additional content needs, right? It increases crawl resistance. And so, when somebody says, well, I call BS, I still get results that way. Okay, great. But you're also working 5 times as hard as you need to. If I got 5 service areas and 5 locations that I want to target in 5 services, I can build a site with 10 pages, significantly less content. There's only 10 target URLs instead of 25 now. So I need less links to achieve results. And so again, I'm not saying that my way is the only way. I'm not saying that at all. Build redundant duplicate content pages on your site till your heart's content. I don't give a damn either way. But what I'm saying is I'm trying to teach people a way to be more efficient and to be better and have a scalable model so that you generate more revenue without as much work. And that's what I've been trying to teach for the last several months. Because again, I have conversations with SEOs all the time that join the mastermind because we have a 30-minute onboarding call. And I can just tell so many people are just fucking exhausted because they're just doing too much. They're trying to be everything to everybody and instead of just focusing in on one thing and getting really, really good at it and reducing your workload. Why reinvent the wheel for every new client that you take on because it's in a new industry that you know nothing about? Why not just build up, build your knowledge in a particular industry, do single variable testing using the framework that I give you or whatever framework you want to use. I don't give a damn whether it's mine or somebody else's, but just go into one industry, figure out what works in that industry and then scale through duplication instead of trying to always start over from scratch. Or keep doing what you've always been doing and then keep complaining about, and I'm not talking about you, Matthew, by the way. But if you don't change what you're doing, then, how can you expect to get better results? And some of you guys are just way overworked, right? And I know it. So the only way you're going to get out of that treadmill or hamster wheel or whatever you want to call it of being overworked and underpaid is to change your business strategy. So anyway, I don't know if that answered your question or not, Matthew, but I tried.